we were having a conversation about this last Friday evening, and talking about like the pay disparity between, the quote unquote average employee, right? That's maybe making an hourly wage, working part-time or full-time hours. And then I think what the average salary here in America, about 70,000, I think actually closer to $60,000 and $70,000. And I think there's a point brought up, I forgot who brought up the point, that is there really a 700 times difference between, the
CEO pay versus a floor person.
Right. And what are your thoughts on that? Kind of if you can recalling your thoughts from that we discussed last Friday, or
it was a heated discussion.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of passionate discussion about that. I think my position on all that is that it all is based on the market, you know. And when you look at these, let's say a house that someone in Buckhead. When I first moved to Atlanta 25 years ago, a little bungalow in Buckhead was $225,000, and this is a home that was built in 1940, one-car garage, 1,500, maybe 1,500 square feet, something like that, $250,000, and this is 25 years ago. That little bungalow today is probably over 600,000, probably. Is it really worth that? Is it really worth that money? Well, it is. Why? Because the market,
someone is willing to pay
someone's
it.
willing to pay it. And the same kind of formula, I think, applies with the pay scale thing. I know it's a different, example. When I hear people compare, and I am remembering the conversation, because you cannot compare the responsibility and what's required of a CEO, especially of a publicly traded company. I mean, you're a CEO, you're a private company, you don't have shareholders.
And there's still the immense responsibility, again, from the perspective.
Absolutely.
If I'm not doing my job correctly, or if I die tomorrow even, it dies tomorrow.
If you had
different type of...
If you had 10,000 employees and you're publicly traded, and you had to answer not only to keep the company going and keep those employees, make sure that they have their paycheck every 2 weeks or every month. And now on top of that, you got shareholders that you're responsible to make sure that the company remains profitable. There's no way you can, in my opinion, again, there's no way one can compare the jobs and the compensation for the person in charge of that versus somebody that gets up and goes to work, does their job for 8 hours or 10 hours or whatnot, goes home and gets to turn it off.
Right.
These CEOs are living they're consumed with this. And you really have to be a gifted person, in my opinion, to be an effective CEO, especially if you're in a serious publicly traded company with a lot of employees. So I feel that CEO pay, if a CEO feels bad about the pay they're receiving and they take the side that, I shouldn't receive this much money, well, give some back to your employees. But my view is the free market is the ultimate the ultimate qualifier. If the market bears it and will pay it, then it's worth that.
Right. Who are we to say otherwise?
Whether that's a house in Buckhead or whether that's the pay level of a CEO person or senior level management. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it's based on free market. Right. And I'm a free market guy. So.
And again, as free as a market can be, because again, that's what I think is often lost in consideration in how we're dealing with companies like in the drone industry, where there's no way in hell that any American company, especially producing their own components, can compete with the Chinese companies, right? And that's also, again, happening in the automotive industry. It's happening in all robotics, same thing. Any sort of advanced manufacturing. I mean, we are so far behind, and by and large, we've been willfully willing to hand that over to China because they have the lower wages and they already have the infrastructure built out. But also because, China has put government incentives in a lot of those industries to make it that we're not on an even playing field. The same thing happened in the memory, like the computer memory industry between Japan and the United States. And, they had to come to a mutual agreements because basically they were both killing the memory market, just further subsidizing it to compete against one another.
Government subsidy.
Yeah. And, of course, we're still doing that in agriculture. At least last I heard, I haven't heard any updates from, I don't know who's even the current head of the Department of Agriculture. I don't know if that's something that the HHS and Robert Kennedy Jr. oversees or not. I know that's something that he's very involved in. And actually, kind of jumping aside, I did see in the cabinet meeting earlier this morning, he announced that the HHS will determine the cause of autism by September.
Really?
That's their goal.
Kennedy said that?
Yep, that's his goal. Yep.
Wow.
Or that's their department
Is that
goal.
his prediction or his goal?
That's his. We will have it by September.
He's making that claim.
And Donald Trump was like, "Wow, this is going to be the biggest news conference." And he's right. I mean, if they really can come out and say, "Hey, you're consuming this, or you're, getting maybe even this shot," again, that's something that no one likes to say or talk about or hear. It's like, but why could that not be at least a contributing factor? Maybe not the primary factor, but.
Let me throw this at you,
Yeah.
and we've talked about this in the past, but this is an argument that I like to bring forth because I lean conservative in my viewpoints, right, based on my core beliefs, I would say, and what I like to tell people when there's discussion about what's happening in the economy and Donald Trump coming in and the Republicans taking control and America First agenda, all this, and there's a lot of change happening, right, and it's causing a lot of making people uncomfortable, right? Because when you have serious change, if you're really doing change, it is uncomfortable. Growth is uncomfortable largely. I love saying this, and I want to get your feedback on it, but I feel that there's one word that we can all bring forth with all this, because you have your opinion, I have mine. Everybody has an opinion. You know what they say about opinions? Everybody's got one, right? Yeah. And so,
they say that about other things.
Yeah, they say that about other things, but there's one thing that we can all say, and that is that this is an objective situation we're in. This guy has the balls to make serious change, profound change, and there's a fruit fly flying around. He's antagonizing me. This guy is making serious change, doing what he thinks, in my opinion, doing what he thinks and his party thinks is the best course of action to put this country on a different or better trajectory than it already is, or it has been.
Got it.
Good.
Mr. Miyagi taught me well.
So we're going to know, and I say at the end of 4 years of him being in office, so 27, 28, we're going to be able to honestly sit back
and evaluate
and say, hey, did this work? And it's 3 to 4 years. It may not be exactly what people think, but are we better off or are we worse off? And that's an objective thing that we're going to be able, through all of the talking heads giving, differing opinions and reporting news differently that we have to deal with every day. People are just craving for the truth.
Right.
We're dying. I feel that Americans especially are dying to know the truth of what the hell's really going on. So that's one gram or granule of comfort that I feel comes into this situation, is that this is objective. We're going to be able to all agree, I think, in 4 years, if another Republican that follows Trump is elected and comes in 28, then we might have another 4 years. There'll be 8 years. But the point is that we're going to be able to tell, I feel for sure, he's making serious change that's either going to work or it's not. So that's comforting to me to know that I feel it's going to be pretty apparent across the country.
I think to many it will, but I never think anything politically speaking will ever inherit, and really just life in general, I don't think about much, if anything, as objective. And I think, you got people, again, if you were to break it into the spectrum or sides, talking about politics here, not talking about the spectrum I'm on, but, you have the
You're
right
on the spectrum.
I mean, again, by calling it a spectrum, everyone is, but in the case of the political spectrum, you have right versus left, and I think it's where was I going with that? You brought up
about objectivity.
The objectivity, that you got people burying their head in the sand on both sides, right? Trump can do no wrong, make America great again, hoorah,
Yep.
Don is the man,
Yep.
And
then
I
there's,
come off across that way a lot of times. But again, what I respect most, to your point, is the transparency. And I think even when there's not a clear answer, coming out and just making those conversations known. And obviously, depending on the situation, it's not best to say, hey, we don't know, in the case of, global, politics, where, you might get asked a question about, some foreign adversary, or I think I even heard Donald Trump in his most recent press conference with Benjamin Netanyahu, and I was like, again, I'm starting to buy into all of the thoughts that maybe Israel is kind of like the puppet behind America dictating our foreign policy with how much we welcome this guy in, and I obviously think that's a very complex situation, and
right.
that wasn't giving a very nuanced, like, real take there. But what I did take note of was a reporter asked Trump what he thinks about happening in, like, this region. I guess from the context I gathered from it, outside of Gaza or around Gaza. But to me, it was also very clear that Trump didn't know, like, where exactly he was talking about, but was able to kind of, like, say I don't know without saying I don't know in a way that, like, it's competence, but it's like, not
he's got a lot on his
right,
plate,
and he's not wanting to give people the soundbite. Like, could you believe that Donald Trump doesn't even know where this is in the Middle East, and it's right outside of Gaza as he's talking to Benjamin Netanyahu? And it's, of course, impossible to know everything that's going on, and that's where I think, as much as people or like you're saying, we're going to have an objective truth, in due time, with how people look at history. Again, going back again last Friday, I think it's very easy. This is history. This is how it's portrayed. And, everyone has this common understanding of this is what history was. But the more and more granular that you actually go and try to understand the nuances of history, you realize that it's not so black or white, right? It's so gray, and we're getting such a maybe not distorted even, but just a sliver of what was actually happening as the events were described in a textbook or a video, or even portrayed via photos or videos, that we may have from the event. And again, just imagine, all of the content and information that we have available at our hands today, and it only gets less and less and less and less and less and less the further you go back. And so I don't think, hey, we're going to be able to have an objective, understanding of the history, because we've never been able to have an objective understanding of history.
And that's where I'll disagree with you. Respectfully disagree. Yeah. I feel that the stuff that's happening right now with the Trump administration, they are radically different than any other president I've seen in my life. And the people of this country, I feel, that voted him in, the majority, they're ready to see some serious change going on, serious change to happen. And it is happening, and he does not care about political consequences. He's not running. He can't run for a third term. I know he's thrown that out there, and I don't want to go down that tangent or get off on that, but yeah. I think he's doing that just to piss people off.
And I'm going to push back on you because he's just a Democrat.
He's just a Democrat?
Yeah.
Well, when he was a business person, he'll tell you, and we all know, he supported both sides because that's what a smart business guy does.
Right. His tariff plan is Pelosi, the video that's going out now. He's doing what Pelosi suggested in
a long time. Yeah, I have seen a little bit of that. But let me stay on this, Jake, because this is important in my opinion.
Yeah.
Objectivity is something that, now, all the real heavy political pundits and Meet the Press and all that, they would be able to tell you, oh, well, at the end of the George H.W. Bush's term or Ronald Reagan's term, it was objective. For sure, we could see that the economy did better, blah, blah, blah. And there's always degrees of it. But we're going to see, in my opinion, at the end of Trump's second term, which is coming up, right, 28 or whenever it is, we're going to be able to say, I think profoundly, that this guy either worked or he did not work. And that to me is something that, I think the common working, common labor or whatever in this country is going to have a much clearer understanding and picture of whether or not Trump worked or he did not work for this country. He's going to be either vindicated or not. So I think it is, and that to me is comforting to know that. I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to be able to face all of my left friends and say to them, and I've told them this,
How about your American friends, though?
yeah, well, we're all Americans.
Right, and that's the thing. It's like we're needlessly making the enemy, out of our own people.
I wouldn't call it enemy. I would just say
the opposition, though.
Well, yeah, it's definitely opposition. I mean, a competitive spirit is that part of Trump's makeup? Absolutely. Being able to, there's been an argument in the past about grouping people and putting people in categories. Don't put me in that category. I'm an American. Why do I have to be an African American? I'm an American. Why do I have to be an Asian American? I'm an American. Hispanic. Right. I happen to be a European American, I guess, right? So
says no one ever, though, right?
Yeah, and my point to you, I'm wanting to stay on this objectivity thing. You just said that you don't buy into what I'm saying, that we will be more in an objective situation at the end of this Trump term where I feel we're going to be able to say, yeah, this tariff situation that he's putting in place now, it either worked or it didn't work. This economy is either going to do like he says, which I hope to hell happens, takes and goes to never before seen levels. And not only that, but the country will be stronger, the dollar will be stronger with all the cuts they're making and trying to get the debt lowered, versus what we've had in the past, where it's just harder to see for the common working people like ourselves. We're middle class America, right?
Yep.
I mean, I'm not a factory guy. I'm retired, and so I'm lucky in that regard. And you're an entrepreneur, starting a company, and you're not working 9 to 5, grind job, So we're not in that category, but still, I think we're going to have, and the average American citizen is going to have a much better idea of whether or not this guy did what he said he was going to do, and the country's better off, or he failed or did not live up to, and the country is less better off. I'm willing to I'll put $1,000 on it. I'll bet you $1,000 at the end of his second term, we're going to be able to see results from this. They may not be what we want, but they will be there.
Yeah, who decides what's objective, though, is the problem, right? Because again, what's better for me may be not better for you, or maybe it is, but I'm just not willing to say it actually is, right?
Well, and that's still objective in that if it's not good for you, then you're going to say no. I'm objectively saying that this situation has not worked. There will be people in this country. Don't mishear me. There will be people in this country who are going to say that it did not work. It failed, and I'm worse off. I think the majority are going to say, yeah, this guy has done the right thing and our country is better off because of these policies. So that's my opinion.
Yeah. And I maybe don't disagree with you, but again, just that's not objective then, right? And that's where I'm like, I think objectively what will happen, right? But then people's perception of what happened, right? You and I can watch the exact same video, and that's the objective, like that's what objectively is there for us to then comprehend, right? And then for us, then even just talking about what our comprehension is of the video, like what we saw, what we witnessed.
That's subjective.
Right.
I see your point. And that's true. Yeah, I can see where you're going with that. To me, I'm categorizing it as it will be very clear. It will be more clear than we've ever had clarity-wise in the past from in my lifetime at least, from a president.
So what other